You probably love your Netflix programs, your bingeable shows, your true crime documentaries. Maybe you're addicted to Squid Game like everyone else, or maybe you like to get a glass of wine and watch old Law and Order episodes. A large variety of high-quality entertainment is one of the pleasures that we do get to enjoy in these dark times. Well, now, the people who make that entertainment have voted to authorize their union to go on strike. And no, I'm not talking about the beautiful actors.
Well, we have some breaking news for you. Members of the union that represent tens of thousands of behind-the-scenes entertainment workers have voted an authorized strike. 90% of eligible IATSE union voters cast ballots, with more than 98% in support of a strike authorization. Now, a strike could shut down much of the state's TV and film production. IATSE wants higher pay, larger contributions to health and pension plans, and more rest periods. The group representing studios and producers say it's committed to reaching an agreement that balances the needs of both parties.
That's right. The men and women who make your favorite TV shows, meaning the cameramen, gaffers, grips, wardrobe coordinators, makeup artists, and script coordinators, have voted to authorize a strike should they not be able to reach an agreement for a new contract with the studios. This would be the first time that the union that represents the people that work in what's called in the biz below the line would go on strike. An IATSE strike would bring the entire entertainment business to its knees. Now, the last major strike in entertainment was the writers' strike of 2007, but that was just the writers. It didn't halt all of production. Studios have thousands of old scripts lying around that they could shoot. It just meant that movies that year were a little bit worse than they would have been otherwise. But if the 60,000 members of IATSE strike, there is no production, period. And that means that the product that the studios need to feed our insatiable appetite for content would halt. It would bring the entire industry to a standstill, which would be especially painful for the studios given that they are coming off a tough year due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So now the workers have more leverage than they have almost ever before. And it's because of that painful year that the studios have been working them to the bone. The Instagram account at IA Stories has been gathering testimonies from workers about what life is like on set these days, and some of them are pretty harrowing. One of them says, "In a way, I hesitate to share this story because it's so personal, but our first AC miscarried on our last set in the middle of the day. She was back the next day. I couldn't stop looking in her direction the entire shoot, her stone face, her quiet and steady work ethic. I knew she was screaming inside. I hope you all scream for her. Strike." And here's another one. "A few days ago, I was asked on a 12-hour shoot. I was told the budget wasn't large enough for a rate, but I needed experience as I'm new to the industry. In good traffic, the commute was 1.5 hours. We wrapped at 4 a.m. On the drive back, I fell asleep while waiting at a traffic light. I found a place to park and slept in my car for a few hours until I felt I could continue." And this issue of falling asleep at the wheel is something you hear over and over again from IATSE workers.
My day is never not 12 hours.
Working 70 hours a week, trying to turn your body around at 4 a.m. on Saturday when you're watching the sunrise, and then trying to pull into your driveway and just get home without falling asleep at the wheel, and then turning around and then working at 6 a.m. on Monday. It is incredibly unsafe, and there isn't a person who I've worked with who hasn't said I've almost fallen asleep at the wheel.
I've definitely had moments of drowsy driving late at night. That's pretty common amongst most people.
In 2014, a crew member named Gary Joe Tuck died in a car crash after falling asleep at the wheel, coming home after working on the set of Longmire.
A crew member from the show Longmire was killed this weekend in a rollover crash while on his way home from the set. It happened about 4:30 a.m. Saturday near Stanley. The Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office says 48-year-old Gary Tuck of Moriarty was driving along State Road 41 when his truck left the road and rolled. Tuck was not wearing a seatbelt and was partially ejected. Investigators believe Tuck fell asleep.
And back in 1997, an assistant cameraman named Brent Hirschman died in a car crash coming home from a 19-hour day on the set of Pleasantville. That inspired the legendary cinematographer Haskell Wexler, winner of not one but 2 Academy Awards, to produce a documentary called Who Needs Sleep?
I discovered in the making of the film that even we privileged film workers work excessive hours. Our normal work days on film and on TV is even longer, 14, 16, 18 hours. And I began making the film when an assistant cameraman friend of mine, Brent Hirschman, died after a 19-hour day, crashed his car. And at that point, that crash and the crew of Pleasantville took a stand against these long hours, saying that he shouldn't have died. He was a very popular guy.
Now, here's a clip from that documentary, which is definitely worth checking out, where actors like Julia Roberts, Annette Bening, and Daryl Hannah talk about the long hours on set.
Just watching the crew, that they work from the moment they get to work till the moment they leave work. I work in kind of little bursts. For me, if I see the crew getting worn out and tired and overworked, then I'll say, no, I have to have my 12 hours. Because if I have 12 hours, I know they have a fighting chance at a nap or something.
The producer has to come to the actor and say, you know, we only have this location for one more day. We had a problem with the camera, it broke. We lost 2 hours. Can you come in a little early, or can you work a little longer? And they're required by law to ask us and to say, can you break that rule? When you compare what happens with the actors versus what happens with the rest of the crew, you get some sort of picture as to the imbalance there.
The crew has to get there before the actors, and they leave after the actors. So the crew is working even longer hours than the actors, and the actors are supposedly protected, and even we're exhausted. So, I mean, I've worked so many movies where I've actually worked 20-hour days, and that's me as an actor, so you know that the crew is working even longer.
It's nice to see that. And it was also nice to see the actors of today chiming in with support for IATSE. Seth Rogen tweeted out, "Our films and movies literally would not exist without our crews, and our crews deserve better." And then he followed up with, "I meant film and TV. It's early." It's okay, Seth. And then Rob McElhenney from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia tweeted out this video saying, Think what you will of Hollywood, but IATSE is the working class lifeblood of this industry. Please support #IATSE Solidarity, #IATSE Strike.
Here's how important IATSE is. Without IATSE, I don't have hair. IATSE paints the hair on. There is no hair without our workforce.
Completely bald. Completely bald. It's bizarre. And naked.
And also, here's our, and also we're naked without that man right there, Brian Wardrobe, Abby Roll, Thea Samuels. Who cares?
Now, IATSE responded with this tweet saying, "You absolutely love to see it. Thank you for standing with us." And then a pic of the title card that says, "The gang stands with IATSE in the style of It's Always Sunny." That's nice. Now, it's hard not to see this IATSE strike authorization vote as part of a larger wave of labor unrest, as companies have been overworking people while they struggle to get out of the pandemic. On this show, we covered the Frito-Lay strike, and the workers there cited the long hours and what they called suicide shifts.
We have to do something with the suicide shifts, because to work 12 hours and be off 8 and work 12 hours, you got time, travel time and everything. I said that's a safety risk.
Imagine being an employee in here that has not had a day off for 5 months. That is the reality of what you're seeing. That is the reality of why you're really seeing the picket over here.
And this was also the case with the Nabisco strike and their parent company, Mondelez.
Here's what's going on here locally. About 200 workers at the factory in North Portland walked off the job earlier this month. They're members of the Bakery, Confectionery, Tobacco Workers, and Grain Millers International Union. They need to shorten that somehow, but I digress. They're upset about changes to their contract with the parent company, Mondelez International. Union leaders say the company has proposed working longer days, 12-hour shifts instead of 8, working without overtime money, and mandatory weekend days without extra pay. The workers say they want to keep things the way they have them now, so they're going to strike until they get their way.
And just this week, the workers at America's Kellogg plants stopped making cereal and went on strike.
Production of Frosted Flakes, Fruit Loops, and Corn Flakes hangs in the balance tonight after workers at all of the Kellogg Company's U.S. cereal plants walked off the job this week.
And when you hear their testimonies, they start to sound very familiar.
We spoke with one of the strike leaders this morning.
Everybody in this plant makes incredible sacrifices that most people wouldn't understand. They work 8 days a week, at least. And that's months on end without a scheduled day off. I mean, some people in the plant don't have a scheduled day off for the entire year. So we're not willing to accept that anymore.
Now, the pandemic may have triggered this new wave of labor militancy. Here's Alex Press writing in Jacobin, quote, "While long hours aren't new, what is different is the outrage among workers in the industry. Workers across the country are gaining confidence, refusing to return to work or quitting existing jobs unless they receive higher pay and better benefits. A desire for shorter hours is central to this dynamic. During the pandemic, expanded unemployment insurance allowed people in a range of industries to enjoy free time for what was for some the first time in their adult lives. Many of those people have no interest in returning to a life defined by overwork. This dynamic is particularly noticeable in the film industry, which effectively shut down during the pandemic. For 6 months, the unions didn't work. And for 6 months, everyone developed hobbies. People got into hiking. They got closer with their kids. They've rekindled relationships with their spouses, says Gottlieb. With production restarting, the shift in attitudes to long hours is hard to miss. People are miserable on set now, and you can tell it's palpable, says Gottlieb. Now, Gottlieb is the guy who started the Instagram account at IA Stories. The strike everywhere in the world is the workers' most powerful tool to improve their lives. But in recent decades, strike activity in America has been almost non-existent. Take a look at this chart. Strikes used to be a common occurrence. It was like a part of life. But the 1980s saw a collapse in strike activity that we've really never recovered from. Now, 2021 looks like it may mark a turning point. You know, we argue about politics all day, but without labor power, it's mostly just talk. To hammer the point home, I think it's worth showing a clip from one of the best labor movies ever made, Matewan. It was written and directed by John Sayles and was released in 1987 at the height of the Reagan era as strike activity was collapsing fast. Chris Cooper, in his film debut, delivers this speech about the power of a strike after he sees some white mine workers racially abusing James Earl Jones.
Union men, my ass. You want to be treated like men? You want to be treated fair? Well, you ain't men to that coal company. Your equipment, like a shovel, a gondola car, a hunk of wood brace. They'll use you till you wear out or you break down or you're buried under a slate fall, and then they'll get a new one. And they don't care what color it is or where it comes from. It doesn't matter how much coal you can load or how long your family has lived on this land. If you stand alone, you're just so much shit to those people. You think this man is your enemy? Huh? This is a worker. Any union keeps this man out ain't a union. It's a goddamn club. Now they got you fighting white against colored, native against foreign, holler against holler. When you know there ain't but two sides of this world. Them that work and them that don't. You work. They don't. That's all you got to know about the enemy. You say you got guns. Well, I know that you all are brave men. And I know you could shoot it out with the company if you had to. But the coal company don't want this union. The state government don't want it. The federal government don't want it. And they're all of them just waiting for an excuse to come down and crush us to nothing. Fellas, we're in a hole full of coal gas here. The tiniest spark at the wrong time is going to be the end of us. So we got to pick away at this situation, slow and careful. We got to organize and build support. We got to work together, till they can't get their coal out of the ground without us, because we're a union. Because we're the workers, damn it, and we take care of each other.
How can we shut the mines down if we don't dynamite them?
The men walk out. All of them.
Fat chance.
And every man that walks out on his own steam, we're taken to the union.
All the Dagos and all the colors.
That's what a union is, fellas. You better get used to it.
Now that film is great. You should check it out. It's on Criterion Channel. Written and directed by John Sayles. Stars great actors like Chris Cooper, James Earl Jones, and David Strathairn. But it was made by the men and women of IATSE. Jen, you like the programs? You like the shows?
You know, Nando, it's funny. It's funny that you bring that up. I think the most recent thing that I binged on Netflix is The Chestnut Man, which actually is Danish. So those workers are treated quite well. And we'll talk about that a little later when we have our friend Matt Brunig come on. But no, I mean, seriously, the IATSE strike is amazing. Or I mean, you know, the strike authorization. 98% of members voted to authorize the strike. That's huge. And I think something that's just as important is the fact that, you know, turnout among the members for that vote was something like 90%. That's almost unheard of.
Yeah, no, it's really remarkable to see, and it's remarkable that it's never happened. Like they've never gone on strike. I mean, I was talking to some friends in the industry, and they're like terrified. They're like, what do you mean? This is all going to shut down for? And like, even if it was shut down for a week or 2 weeks, like you realize just how much power they have. And there's nodes like that all over the economy that a relatively small group of people can have like an absurd amount of power. I mean, the Hollywood business is billions and billions and billions of dollars a year, and 60,000 workers could literally bring it all down to its knees. I
like that headline you shared of Daniel Craig complaining about the Quantum of Solace writing because of the writer's strike. That movie did suck, but
No, it did. I mean,
but I mean, you bring up a good point, which is that, you know, the writer's strike back in 2007 was disruptive enough, but at the same time, it is, you know, was nowhere near the scale of what an IATSE strike would be.
Yeah, and you know, the writers are relatively well paid. I mean, there's some writers who are, you know, really struggling or whatever. But in general, if you're a working writer in Hollywood, you're making good money, and again, you're just not as, I mean, you're essential in the long run in the process, but you can't shut the whole thing down by going on strike. I mean, there are hundreds and thousands of scripts lying around. You know, the studios have shelves of scripts. They can bring them out, and yeah, it sucks that they can't do rewrites, and it sucks that they can't do, you know, ongoing shows or whatever. But they'll figure out a way.
Yeah.
You know, without cameramen, without editors, without wardrobe, costumes, makeup, lighting, sound, all that shit, like, they can't do anything.
Yeah. I think that the point that you bring up about how the working conditions, you know, that the IATSE members are facing actually, like, unfortunately and bizarrely mirror a lot of the working conditions that you see reflected in other sectors of the economy, long hours, just unfair treatment, being unable to sleep. I mean, that I think is really crucial, because I almost feel like, you know, a lot of the media coverage that we see around work conditions during the pandemic is stuff like, oh, we all work from home now. Like, the new work is like Zoom and sweatpants and stuff. And I saw recently there was some statistic that was like the percentage of people in America who actually work from home was like 13%. Like, it's something ridiculously small compared to the amount of media coverage that you saw, you know, around the issue of remote work. Now, don't get me wrong, there are also labor issues related to remote work. I know Anna, I think, has covered that on the show before. And, I'm not saying that those aren't important. They are actually, and those have longer range implications as well. But what I'm getting at is, during this time when many of us were fortunate enough to be working from home and behind screens, like a lot of other workers, perhaps the majority of workers in the US, had the screws turned on them.
Yeah, no, and it's and to the extent that they get covered, there was a lot of coverage about like COVID protocols and all this stuff, and that's good. There was a lot more coverage about like how they were not wanting to go back to work after
Right.
the unemployment insurance. There wasn't a lot of coverage about how they're just being ground to dust, like it's because of the, it's part of, maybe because some workers aren't going back to work, that the companies are just kind of being like, okay, well, the ones we do got, we're just going to make them work 16-hour days. Which is just crazy. I mean, there's no way that is sustainable on any level, that it's, there's dangers, there's safety issues, but it seems like it's had the effect of sparking a little bit of a labor revival. So we'll see. If you enjoyed this video from Jacobin Weekends, please hit like and subscribe. That way, you'll enjoy all of our backlog, as well as all of our future content, including interviews, live streams, and clips. Thank you.